All right. Well, welcome to the June 11th, 2024 meeting of the Finance Committee for the City of Port Orchard. We've got a few folks in attendance here. Can you just let us know who's all with us today?
I'm Fred Chang, a council member.
John Morrissey, also mute challenged council member.
Finance Director Noah Crocker.
And I'm Mark Trineri. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee for 2024. All right. So Noah, the first topic we've got going on is the sales tax and REIT revenue reports. Can you take it away, please?
Yeah, certainly. So I did want to mention we do have a kind of an intense budget or intense agenda today. Lots of stuff I want to cover, and I want to honor kind of our commitment to the 1 hour meeting. So we'll be a little bit light on the finances, but I'll follow up next week with a monthly report. But jumping right into the sales tax, good numbers so far for this month. And the chair and I were just discussing this right before everyone else jumped on. You can see for May, we collected $681,000, which was roughly $74,000 more than in 2023. So when we compare it to 2023, that's a 12% growth for that period of time. But more importantly, when we look at the year-over-year growth rate, we're sitting on about 5.2% roughly. So that's actual growth in sales tax when we compare the same period year over year. When we compare to our budget, we're currently 22% above budget. Again, as we've discussed previously, that's really due to our conservative budgeting practices. But that does come in handy as we develop a fully financially stable budget. So overall, we've collected almost 80% of our biennial revenue sitting here in May. Again, this is through May of 2024, so that we're in good shape as it goes to sales tax. I did not have an update on REIT yet. Again, we moved this meeting up a little bit, so I did not have the county reports yet. So as soon as I do have those, I'll send out an email to update the Finance Committee. Are there any comments or questions or discussion on the sales tax? Good. Pretty straightforward. It's a good month. We like to see that type of growth rate. Yeah. So moving on, budget. So a lot of this conversation is going to focus on a budget amendment that I've talked about in previous meetings. I'm preparing to bring this budget amendment on the 25th. But before I get into the details of that, I did want to address this question that Councilmember Morrissey asked at the last council meeting. I believe the question is, what is the financial impact of the personnel and reorganizational changes that were recently adopted? So I think it's important to understand that this is kind of a complex math equation in a lot of ways. But I did want to hit the highlights and then kind of get what my opinion is of the financial impact is. So when we do these type of things, we make certain assumptions based on current staff levels, employees at the time of adoption. This includes salaries, benefits, and longevity. And that becomes impactful to the financial consideration as when we have a senior employee who's been here for 15, 20 years, they've moved up the pay scale, they have stronger longevity pay. If they retire out or leave and we replace them with a new employee, generally that employee is on the lower end of the pay scale. So that's what makes the math kind of tricky when you ask about the financial impact, because each year we have a lot of retirees, people leaving, so the numbers are constantly in flux as far as financial impact. And that's kind of what we found when we evaluated the activity in 2020, that there was significant movement in personnel positions, retiring, employees leaving for other opportunities. And so we are continuously rehiring, specifically in the personnel public works department. So with this reorg and all the changes adopted, including one FTE for civil engineer one, which we adopted the position and the description in the last amendment, but I intend on bringing forward the FTE add on the 25th. We expect that with all those changes, it's roughly additional $69,000 of cost for the remaining 6 months. And so that was really, I guess, targeted at Councilmember Morrissey's questions. What's the cost? With all the new positions added, it's an additional cost of $837,000. But part of this reorg, we removed positions and removed FTEs. We shuffled around, so there were savings of $768,000, which led to an actual increase of $69,000.
Hey, Noah, wouldn't it be true though? Because I believe you and I discussed this. that new engineer position, we're assessing it fully to the general fund because we don't know until this person starts working what work they'll be doing and where we could charge their time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And this slide isn't getting into the fund impact. It's just saying the total impact to the city as a whole.
Gotcha.
So
Okay. Right.
the 69,000 again, depending on the individuals get hired and what they get assigned for tasks, whether they're going to be doing more work in water, sewer, storm, or street, we'll divide up how those costs are truly allocated by fund. But I think I was trying to take a step back to say, hey, what's just
The
a
total
simple
cost.
answer would be 70,000
Yeah.
overall for the city impact. And again, that kind of assumes now that we are fully employed, all the position changes have been made. So there's a lot of assumptions that go into that as well. So I don't think we'll recognize that 69,000 of additional expense just due to the timing of hiring and the position changes. But it is a number I could stand on at least.
Makes
Thank you
sense.
for getting that to us, Noah.
John, that makes sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That's precisely what we were looking for.
Good. Okay.
Oh, so that 69,000 is not just general fund, but all funds?
Correct. It's
Okay.
the impact
thanks.
of all the changes.
Okay.
Okay, so the way I've teed this up, I got a couple of different things. I have a staff report kind of written out to kind of detail the impact, so you can kind of walk through and see what I'm proposing is an increase in sales tax revenue and vice versa. I have a document in here that focuses on a higher level look, and I think I kind of want to start there to kind of have this conversation. We'll circle back to this, but in the spirit of kind of what is the financial impact? Okay, all these proposed changes that we're going to talk about, what's the total change? What's the proposed changes? You can see here at the total here on the income statement. What I'm requesting is an additional appropriation for expenditure authority of $2.766 million amongst all funds. So we'll just round off $3 million, say an additional $3 million of expenses, and we have with accompanying $3 million of revenue to pay for these budget amendments. So that's the high level. When we work further down this income statement, you'll see here on the left, I identify which fund is being impacted. So here we have the current expense fund, our general fund 001. You can identify here that I'm requesting adjustments of both revenue and expenses for this fund. And the net impact is $262,000 on our ending fund balance. So I kind of like to walk these through for you guys, because then if you guys have them at home, you can kind of read through and it might make a little bit more sense of how this impacts each fund. So the general fund in particular, you can see that for our biennial budget, we have budgeted $14.3 million to begin the biennium. We have budget revenues of $32 million. We have budgeted expenses of $44 million with these changes, which would leave us an ending fund balance of $2.3 million by the end of 2024. Okay.
And that assumes we have all positions filled, that we have all, that we execute on every project that we plan to, which many times they don't. But you have to plan for every dollar being spent.
Yeah, that's true. And I think for this conversation, that'll be good for us to keep our minds in that we're in the budget world right now, budget, which means that we anticipate all expenditures budget to be spent. When you get your monthly reports, that's when you're able to, and I discuss kind of where we're at with revenues and expenses, whether we're under spending right now due to salary savings, just we haven't executed on projects. And that's the true actual financial impact. But this is really from a budget authority perspective. So you see there are no requests for 002 at this time, although I'm going to come back to that. Neither for stabilization, criminal justice, 104, 107. Let me back this up. I should just only show the ones that were impacted. I have impact fee fund here, Fund 111. Again, impact fees are used to fund our capital projects. So we'll talk about that. But we're gonna have $438,000 of additional expense being requested. And really, I'm not increasing revenues here, I'm reducing fund balance because we have the funds available from a budget perspective. We don't need to increase our revenue to cover these additional expenses. The cash is available. When we do this type of transaction, it's going to be transferring money from our Fund 111 to our capital projects. 302 is a capital construction fund. So again, I do have some money in there, revenue and expenses. 304 is also our street capital construction fund, roughly $670,000 of additional budget authority there. And then we come to water operating, water capital. I'm only sliding through these because we're going to talk about this a lot once we get into this specific project. I really just wanted to highlight how to use this table as we kind of have the conversation so you guys can flip back and forth. So I think what I want to do is I want to look specifically, when we're looking at this budget amendment, there were 2 or 3 projects that really stood out as far as impacting this budget amendment. Pottery non-motorized, that's a project that we are doing now. The council has just awarded the contracts to go forward, I think 2 months ago. We're under construction now. Again, when we started the biennial budget, we weren't sure on costs and when things would move forward. So this budget amendment we're going to walk through is meant to fully fund this project to complete it this year. And what I'd like from this finance committee is kind of feedback on the presentation of the material, because the prior finance committee liked things different, and I'm trying a different approach based on comments and conversations that we've had over the last 6 months. I think this might be a better way to display the information for you guys. So this first slide, we're looking at the total project budget. And again, I view this as the total to complete this project right now, and the total will be cost on it. So for this tip project, the total cost is $2.5 million. And you can see the pie chart here of how we divide this up. And over here on the table, I identify by expenditure type and the amount that we have estimated for the project. And I'm just gonna kind of walk down through these. So right away, consulting services and purchases, $144,000. Salary and benefits, that's in-house design, that's in-house salary and benefits, $60,000 to be spent. And then we have our construction contract, which again was recently awarded for the different pieces, sidewalk and pavement for Schedule A, roughly $1 million. Storm drainage work for Schedule A, $50,000. Water main, which is Schedule B, $237,000. And sewer Schedule B for another $710 roughly $1,000. We have some miscellaneous expenses for permitting, and just there's always just miscellaneous expenses that don't get captured in these other categories very well. Roughly $23,000. Construction management services. Now I highlight this because this was the contract that Public Works brought forward last meeting. That was for an additional on-call construction management services of a total of $150,000. And the plan is that they know they do not have the in-house resources currently to manage all these projects. So they're going to allocate $35,000 of that contract towards this project for construction management. And the remaining $115,000 is going to go towards Bethel. So those were the 2 projects that Public Works said, hey, we don't have any current employees to be able to manage the projects. We'd like to third party this out and for consulting services. The council awarded $150,000 contract, and $35,000 of that is estimated to be used for pottery. Contingency.
And on this project, I just would like to interject here that it only has us paving half street where the water utility or sewer line is being put in. And I've asked Public Works to get a number on what it would cost to potentially pave the whole street versus having a bunch of patchwork out there. And so I don't have that number. If it's reasonable, we may discuss that. So if we have the contractor and paving equipment on site, it may be a good idea to pave the whole street versus just part of the street since when we're doing all this work. So just a thought.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, along that line, what length of this street are you talking about? Because it's pretty poor down towards the Berry Lake intersection.
Yeah.
Even before this construction period, that little section between there and Highway 16 overpass was really
This
bad.
project, I believe the area of effect is Berry Lake back to the middle school. And then the project we're doing next year is Berry Lake to the apartments. So
Correct.
so there's two different projects I'm referring to, and I know we're gonna patch all this, what we're cutting up right now, and we're gonna make it better, but can we, and I'm just asking the question, can we afford to overlay the street? And I don't know the answer to that yet.
Okay.
So the last expense item we identify as a part of the overall project budget is contingency. So we generally try to put in 10 to 20% of the total value of the project just in contingency. From experience, we tend to have change orders and things occur that we were not aware of, couldn't have planned for. So we do throw in some money for contingency. So again, that brings us to a total project currently of 2.5 million. And you can see by the pie chart the use of funds. Moving to the next slide, I want to identify the source of the funding. So that side is okay, here's the project, how are we going to spend it? This slide is intended to show us what fund and funding sources are we using to pay for it. So at the top here, we'll start with our Fund 001, which is our current expense fund, $331,000. And Fund 001, and I identify this storm drainage because part of the Fund 001 will make the transfer to 304 for street and sidewalk type work. This part, Fund 001, our current expense fund, to the storm drainage fund would be $50,000 going to the storm capital fund to pay for expenses for storm related activity for the project. We currently have funds 111, which is our transportation, or which is our impact fee fund. And within there, we would use transportation impact fees up to $483,000. Now, at this moment in time, this is the max that we can use of TIF money for this project based on our plans. We do have a grant from WSDOT, the Washington State DOT, and we have already received those funds. So those funds have been sitting in our account earning interest, which leads us to our next category, Fund 304, interest earned on the balance. So over the last year and a half, we've earned roughly about $40,000 of interest based on the $650,000 that DOT provided us already. So that really does help to offset some of the rise in costs that we've been able to earn interest and can apply that towards the project as well. And then again, as you saw in the uses, there's a Schedule B for water and a Schedule B for sewer. So we just tie those together and say Fund 411 to 413 capital, $237,000 for water expenses, and then $709,000 for sewer expenses. Again, the chart on the table, the pie chart on the right shows the source of funding and the different percentages, so you can quickly see how much we're relying upon. So for example, for the grant revenue, we're relying on it to pay for 28% really, because this little sliver is that grant interest. So 28% of the project's gonna be paid for from WSDOT. So I just want to make sure that there's no questions with these two charts, because one's on the sources of the uses of funds for the project and the sources of funds for the project.
No, there's no sliver for the storm drainage.
Yeah, it's right here, this 2%. Oh, for the 001. For the chart, I just rolled it into this green pie because it's coming from our current expense fund 001. The money's coming from 001. It's just kind of where I'm using the funds separately. But yeah, so it's incorporating this 15%. Okay, so I want to give you an update on where we're at as far as the project's concerned to date. To date, we've spent $152,000, or roughly 6% of our total project budget has been spent on this project. Again, identify by what category we have spent. You can see again, the council just awarded the construction contract, so we have not incurred any expenses for that. But over the next few AP cycles, you'll see expenses coming through as we get those invoices approved. Which means that we got a lot of spending to do between now and September, I believe, is when they're going to be done. So that's just kind of gives you an overview on the project, expenses, the source of funding, kind of where we've spent today. And now this slide hopefully highlights the budget amendment I'm asking for. So I'm just going to again walk through this slide, I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit so we can see a little bit better. Okay. So then again, the far left column, you see the total project budget by expense category. I've identified in the next column over how much budget we used in 2021, as well as the next category for 2023-24. These are all used to then calculate what I would need in my amendment to fully fund this expense category. So I'm just going to take one, for example, the top one, right away, consulting services and purchases. We have a total project budget of $144,000. In 21-22, that was the only expenditure that we incurred and used as far as the budget is concerned. And we used roughly $9,000 of that, which means that when I budgeted for 23-24, I already knew I needed roughly $135,000 to fully fund this expenditure. So we did that. I'm not requesting a budget amendment as a part of this proposal. So with the new budget, this would still be $135,000 for right-of-way consulting services for the project. So that's how you kind of read this table left to right. I do want to highlight the ones that I am requesting funding for. You'll see here design and salary benefits. We don't typically budget for those in the capital funds. We typically come back after we've got a project underway and know how much we have spent and do what I call a cleanup amendment to add salary and benefits to that budget project category. I don't want to over budget my capital salary benefits until we know if the projects are moving forward. So now we know this one's moving forward and we have incurred some expenses, but you'll see here, I didn't budget anything in 21 and 22, nor in the beginning of the biennial budget. So now with this project target of 60,000, I'm requesting 60,000 of an amendment that would bring me a total budget for 23-24 for design for salary benefits to 60,000. So again, I'm just trying to highlight how to read the table. We did budget some money for the construction phase, but once the bids came in, now we can kind of true that up here with this amendment. And we realize we need an additional 327,000 for the sidewalk and pavement, an additional 50,000 for storm drainage, 137,000 additional to the 100 that we already have in the budget, and another 209 for sewer in addition to the 500,000 we have in the budget. So you can see in the total amendments here, bringing us all the way down, I'm requesting another $1 million, 65,000 to fully fund this project budget. So when we look at what we currently have budgeted, we have $1.4 million budgeted. We need an additional $1.065 million of budget authority to complete this $2.5 million project. Are there any questions on how to read this table?
Yeah, well, I don't know about how to read the table. I think the table in and of itself is very well done. Thank you, Noah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have some questions around. So we have a project budget. What was this project budget when we set the original current budget at $1,425,000?
The project budget was based on engineers' estimates, which are just that, they're estimates. You know, sometimes we're low, sometimes we're high. In the current kind of construction environment, it's vastly different than when we go out to bid and we find out what the true cost to build the project is. Is that what you
Yeah, it's a fair question, Councilmember Morris. What's tricky about this is these budgets are always evolving. So if you went back and looked at the original 23-24 budget, I don't believe it was 1.4. I think it was closer to the 690 and maybe with the 135. So it's probably 825 is probably the original budget, which means that we were only focused in on the time providing enough expenditure authority to do right of way and design work. And then we knew once we went out to bid, then we'd have some real numbers to talk about and how to fund that. If I put too much into it's you're almost backing off bad numbers to put in the right numbers. So you might as well not put anything in and be clear and focused about what you're trying to achieve as you kind of move forward with these projects.
Okay, yeah, no, I think I'm just trying to understand the whole, this is all new. The whole cycle here. So I guess just for future clarity, right? When we set aside, I think what I'm hearing, Noah, is that when we probably set this budget in the fall of 22, we thought this particular project in Pottery 1.15 was, did I hear you right? Like 700, almost 800,000.
And
Yeah,
John,
yeah,
to-
I'm saying that's probably conversation that we had. And,
Okay,
and then,
perfect.
and then as the project evolves,
Yes.
and you'll experience this, things that we identified where the mayor said, hey, maybe we can gain some efficiencies by overlaying the whole road now, right? Well, we weren't talking about that, but that is now an opportunity the city evaluates and says, hey, maybe we should do that. Can we afford to do that? Does it make sense? And I can point that out because with this water main replacement and the sewer work, those again weren't originally contemplated in the project. It was really about this road diet, again, sidewalks. So it was really limited in scope. And then as we evaluated the value of the project, went, hey, now would be the time to do these other things.
And again, these are all process related questions so that I
Yeah.
just understand moving forward. So you went from that 800. So we've had maybe multiple budget amendments to this project already to get you to the 1.4.
So let me
Correct.
take you back even farther and where these things are developed is remember we just awarded a contract to update our traffic impact fees. Okay.
Mhm.
So that is we do that process every 5-6 years, we hope, sometimes sooner. And we develop a list of projects and their estimated cost. Okay. Time goes by. And this is an example. The initial number for this project was just that, a road diet. It didn't involve sewer and water work. And all of a sudden now we get a grant to fund the road diet and the sidewalk improvements. Oh, we're going to do this project now. Well, gosh, if we're going to do this project, and put some new blacktop down, we dang well better put some pipes in the ground first. So now all of a sudden the project grows in scope. And now the mayor's, talking to Public Works, and really what it'll come down to is if we don't have any surprises and we've got contingency dollars left at the end of the day, that's probably a really appropriate way, but you can't plan on spending those now because we haven't even started digging digging in the ground very much. We don't know what surprises we're going to find.
I'm just trying to understand the full process especially as we go into budget season this summer and fall. So yeah, I'm tracking what you're saying, Mr. Mayor. So we've already had budget amendments for this project.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I don't know about budget amendments, but the scope of the project has changed. Now we're doing the budget amendments.
Well, both. So again, I would say we had an original budget in the fall of 2022, and let's call it the 650. It was 650 plus 105, so 700,000 is what we thought right away design. Mid-biennial review, which was the fall of 2023, we've now scoped this project out a lot more, and then you can see here that's where the water and the sewer came in. And we said, hey, this would be a good time. And we said, well, how much do you think? We were like, not sure. Well, let's set some money aside so we don't start budgeting that for other projects as well. And so you can start to see the budget impact on the funds themselves once you really incorporate it. Because now we're really committed to that. Now we move forward, design gets to 100% design, we drop the bids and we go, shoot, cost a little bit more than we thought it was going to. And that's where you see this amendment coming in for these pieces.
And then I think some of my final questions, because I hear now you're going to bring to us this budget amendment for the 1 million. Is this at a point and just following the entire process where now, we've got that 90% design, we're ready. This is total final costs or no? Or pretty close?
I believe this is pretty close. I mean, you can't ever be sure until we do.
Correct.
Because we're under construction now, right? Now we're under construction. We have a deadline of August to complete this. So this project is moving, as far as I'm aware, Mayor, unless something's changed this last week. As far as I know, Public Works is going and the contractor's going and they're putting up signs and we're underway.
Okay.
And we have $225,000 in contingency dollars. So we hope never to touch this again. But when you dig holes in the ground, sometimes you find things that aren't where they're supposed to be. Big rocks the size of cars. We had one of those in Tremont. Things that beyond the scope. But the size of this project and that contingency, I would hope that we aren't talking about this again.
And this follows. This is the basic gist, right? We'll put it in a budget. based off of what we think is at the time. If we get that chance to update it in a biennium a budget update to get closer to what we think realistic, and then we'll vote on it maybe a third time when we're closer to the end, when we know that this is what it's going to cost. Is that generally, am I following that?
Yeah, I think you're following it, and I think you're right. I think at this moment in time, I think this is a complete project. I think by September, we're going to come in at 2.4 million. We're going to talk about how we came in under budget, and then we're moving on. Ideally,
Perfect.
that's the scenario we're looking for, right? But
Perfect. Thank
we
you.
gotta
I
get through the
think all
summer
this
and see.
numbers make sense. I'm just trying to understand process and what we'll be looking at moving forward. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think this is a good moment to, so I'll just take a minute to do this because I got to keep moving forward. What really will complicate this later is when these projects get going and they don't get completed in the fiscal year. So when it gets, say, 30% complete, and then now we're going to talk about rebudgeting, this is where it gets a little different because now I'm only going to budget, 70% of this project in the next biennial budget. And that's where you go, well, shoot, how are these numbers playing out? And so that's why I kind of showed this to begin with, 21 to 22. We only had 9,000 because is at the end of the year, we're like, hey, let's get forward, start doing some stuff to get this underway. So good questions. You're on the right track, especially considering we're going to budget soon, how to think about these things.
And Noah, we will be, sounds like we'll be discussing some information when we hear back from Public Works what the additional cost would be to overlay the entire road.
Yeah, I will have to check back in the mayor with that. That's new news to me right here with you guys. So I've developed a process that was complete. That was new news to me. Don't know what they're contemplating. So at this moment in time, I'm focused on this budget amendment. So this is the expenditure side of the budget amendment. Again, you'll see here I provide the source of funding as a part of the budget amendment. And here's what's going to really trick your mind on a couple other projects. Because we're in the budget world, they don't always have to match. Sometimes I'll budget more sources of revenue on the front side of a project, and you'll find that the budget authority for the expenditure side is less. As long as in general we have more revenues than we do expenses, that's usually a pretty good thing for a project because you have more money, right? So you'll see that in a couple things. You'll be like, well, shoot, these don't match. And I'll go, yeah, because I had more money to budget than expenses, but that doesn't mean there might be an amendment later. But for this one, I think this one actually did match. Yeah, so this one did match 1,065,000 on expenses, 1,065,000 on revenue. Again, I want to point this out that this would be an additional $381,000 coming from the general fund for this project. Actually, we haven't contributed any general fund money to this project yet, so this would be $381,000 of contribution going to the project. We would, in total, again, we are going to transfer $483,000 of transportation impact fee money. Again, if you go through the transportation impact fee plan and see all the different projects and the values of those projects that we use to set the fee schedule, this is the max that we can use of those funds for this project. And each project has its own max. Again, the grant interest, water contributing for its portion, and sewer contributing for its portion to get us to the total $1,065,000.
And then all of that goes back to the original ones, the charts you showed us up top, and how that impacts each individual fund.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. I gotcha.
So then again, here's just a summary, real simple. I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can. Current expense, total impact, 386,000. Impact fees, another 338,000. Water operating, 137,000. 209 from sewer capital, and then that's going into the different capital construction funds for spending authority. Okay, so that's the pottery project. The other project I want to talk about is Melcher. Again, as you say, I think this project at this moment in time is a complete project of $1,075,000. I think when we originally started this project, we thought it was going to be a $500,000 project total. And then we got some bids and they came in a lot higher than we anticipated. And there were some other upgrade PSC expenses that we weren't aware of until we kind of got further along the project. So where we sit today, I believe we need 10,000 of salary benefits budget, $125,000 for design. There's a PSC upgrade for the power facility, miscellaneous expenses, again, permits and other things. And then construction, really 790,000 with 80,000 of contingency. I think this was the number that came in a lot higher than we anticipated. But again, this is an important project. It's a rehabilitation of a water pump station on Melcher Avenue. It includes new mechanical equipment, new pumps, new controls and generators. It also repairs the building, puts a new roof on, some paint, and upgrades light fixtures. So it's an important facility for the city. And if you want further discussion on that, we can kind of loop back with Public Works to really have the experts talk about the value of the project itself. You can see here, again, 73% of the costs are all for construction. Actually, I'd say 80%. I'm gonna throw in that contingency factor in construction. Now, again, if we come under budget, great, then we don't spend the money.
Mhm.
Noah, in general, which fund is providing for the contingency?
So let's move to the sources of funding. Let's take a look at that. So what we have, it's a hard question to answer, and that's why I want to kind of look at it from the fund perspective. What we have are different funds providing cash for the project. We have a public works loan of $500,000. Again, that's where we thought the original project was going to be. Expenses came in more. We're coming back. We've actually asked Public Works board if we could increase the loan, and they said there's a process to do that, but we would have to rescind our original loan request and resubmit. And doing that puts us back in the line, in the queue, I guess, if you will, for loans. So it wasn't necessarily the most desirable approach. We would be worried that we wouldn't get approval at that point. So we thought we would go forward with the project using our local funds. The main source for this project is because it's an enterprise project. It's all about water. It's a water funded project. And it's funded from two water sources. Again, this is where it's going to be important because we talked about this at council meetings, how growth pays for growth, and ratepayers pay for maintenance and replacement of the current facilities. So we have a breakdown here of 75% of this project was identified in the water capital plan to be paid for from water rates. That's Fund 411. 75% of this project was intended to be paid for from water rates, with 25% being attributed to growth and its impact on the system. So that would be the water capital facility charges will contribute 25% to this project. And I focus on the percentages because the dollars change depending on if we get favorable bids, if we have them in the budget. So it's important to think 75% and 25% more than a fixed 430 and 144. But based on the math here, we'll use this Public Works loan for $500,000. We'll contribute 75% of the remaining cost from water operations, $431,000, and water capital CFCs will round it out with $143,000 left to get us to the $1,075,000. I think it's also a good time to mention that when we take out debt and we start to repay the debt, so the Public Works Trust Fund loan here, Public Works Board loan, when we start to repay this, we will actually use the same percentages for the debt repayment as well. So we'll have a 75-25 contribution for the debt payment, which is consistent with the water capital plan, which is consistent with how we make up the delta with cash. And so that's just an overall comment. I want to make that as you see debt, if there's an element that's operating in capital, we track those percentages and we make the debt payments accordingly. It does make the accounting a little more complex because you have to break up these things by certain percentages, but we think it's equitable and fair that growth pays for growth.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that 413 fund is where the developer fees go into. And so then the 411 is our existing customers. So this project is largely replacing existing 75% replacing existing infrastructure, which our ratepayers are 75% responsible for, and adding some capacity as we rebuild it, which then development is paying for.
No, where would I find the lump sum that we pay in interest as part of this attributed to this project in an expense?
Well, since we haven't drawn on the loan yet, we haven't incurred any interest expense for this project.
I'm talking like in the budget though, where, if it's $1,075,000, where do we account for how much that's going to cost in interest?
Is that
All right,
Interest will be
I-
on the 500,000. It'll be part of our budgeting process to account for those payments.
And that
Wouldn't be
doesn't start, the interest doesn't start until we receive money from that loan, correct?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, so I think that's what you're asking, John, is as far as the debt's concerned, this Public Works loan, it's on the books, we've awarded, but we haven't drawn on it. So we will make budget, we'll make it a part of the 25-26 budget to start repaying that loan next biennium. By this point, we haven't even drawn the proceeds. We haven't gone forward with this project at all. We just have it available to us. So that we do not pay interest on this until we draw on it.
So we don't project out the true cost of this project because there's added expense in interest.
Correct. I mean, I guess maybe you're looking for the terms and conditions of the loan.
I mean, I don't care what the term. I mean, I do care what the terms and conditions, but that's not the question. I'm like, I was wondering if in either of those fund 411 to 413 payments, that those are odd dollar amounts because we're projecting what that interest would be, right? Because if I'm looking at a total budget, what is the total cost of taxpayer? It's not 1,075,000.
Yeah, but it's not part of this project process. It's part of the budget process. This is the construction side of it. He's showing you the sources for the construction.
Yeah, you're both correct. And so maybe it might be helpful if I pulled the interest rate. Because I think this was 2%.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding
Yeah.
accounting practices, what we have at my dealership, right? Like if I'm looking at the total cost of that, I got to take into account what that costs. Or sometimes when somebody's buying an RV, right? Okay, it's $100,000 RV, but that doesn't take into account I'm going to pay $132,000 in finance charge. So really, this has cost me $232,000 to buy that RV. Right?
I hear you, John. I worked in lending and
Yeah.
in finance before too, but yeah, we don't. This is the construction side of it and the budgeting side of it, and then there's the budget side of it is the other set of books. And I will say that this loan's 2%. I think Marina Pump Station was 1%. When our costs are going up by 10% a year or more, any of these loans that we can qualify, we're doing our rate pay, in particular when it's ratepayer paid, we're doing our ratepayers a favor by fixing the expense versus trying to save money to pay for it in cash.
I'm with you. I just want to know where do we account for that in the budgeting side?
It's on the budget side.
Yep.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, just from a ground level perspective, you may know, because you've got the most experience of the 5 of us sitting here. What's the age of that pump station? When was it actually built initially?
Predates
Before
me.
your time?
Yeah,
Before
before my time. It's old. Yeah.
Noah, in the unlikely event that we don't use the contingency funds, I'm just curious if we know where they go back to. Would they all go back to the current fund, for example? Or would they be apportioned back into the sources that they came from?
Yeah, good question. So the simplest way to think about that, hold on, I was trying to pull the debt schedule if I could. The simplest way to think about it is as we incur expenses on a monthly basis, we attribute the revenue side to those expenses. So it'll be a 75-25 every payment that gets paid out. So the contingency is really on the back side that we'll never touch it. So there's no money going back to the funds because we never spent it.
So it was never taken out in the first place.
Pardon?
It's like it was never spent, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, we planned for it, but because the budget in this scenario, the project came under budget, we never ever spent it. So there was no reimbursement to the funds. But in a general sense, it would be the water. If it had been spent, and then there was some weird reimbursement, I don't know how that would work, but then it would be 75% capital or water operating and 25% to water capital. It would maintain those relationships.
Thank you.
So similar as before, in total for this project, we've spent $120,000 to date, which is roughly 10% of the overall project budget that we just kind of walked through. When we look to the budget amendment, again, I'm identifying where we're currently at, the 23-24, how much budget we used in 21-22, and to complete this full $1,075,000 funding, I need an additional $551,000 of budget expenditure authority. And then we tee that up with the sources side of the equation. Again, Public Works loan. Since I fully budgeted loan, I don't need a budget for that. I do need additional sources of funding from the Water Operations Fund, 431, and the Water Capital Fund of 142 to bring us to our total sources of the project of $1,075,000. So again, here is an example where I briefly mentioned that they don't always have to match. Where you can see here the total sources I'm requesting is 574,000 of additional sources, and expenses only 551,000. Again, a lot of that's just due to the timing of the budget and how much budget authority I have currently for each of those categories. Okay, so those are the two projects specifically that are included. Again, I'm gonna go back up to this staff report. So again, now focus back on the staff report. What I'm trying to communicate is the proposed amendment would impact the current expense fund. And here are the items that we would amend the budget for. We'd increase sales tax revenue by $200,000. I'm just trying to bring in a little bit additional revenue to cover these expenses, not just to use all of my ending fund balance. And we do have the sales tax revenue in 2023 to absorb that $200,000. Transfers out would be funds going to 302 for this public works shop. The Givens Park project is now starting to get underway. I want to use more of my rec reserve balance. It's not much more. We don't have a large rec reserve balance. I think in total it's 50,000 remaining. Again, that's where we get the admission tax, but we are no longer collecting that because the theater is no longer in business in the community. So I'm trying to spend those rec reserves down, so we just don't have to track those anymore. So we've got it all budgeted except for roughly about 10 grand for this project for Givens Park. Pottery, again, we walked through the project budget, so I'm asking for the $331,000 to come from the general fund to Fund 304, and 50,000 to go to Fund 423, which is again our storm capital fund. There are some expenses for an E&R purchase, and again, that's going to come late in the show, but there will be some requests for ER&R expenses for vans and vehicles and equipment. So that's the way to read this: the fund, the various requests, and then the impact to the ending fund balance, 262. Similarly, for Fund 111, the impact fee fund, again, money going out from park impact fees and transportation impact fees. Transportation impact fees are going to the Pottery Avenue. Park impact fees, I'm requesting $100,000 of park impact fees to go towards Givens Park. A question that Mr. Morrissey might ask is, well, why is so much now? When we started this budget for Givens Park, it was originally planned and conceived that the Rotary was going to contribute, I think it was $150,000. Now where we're at, we see the contributions more like $53,000. And so if the council and the city wants this project to continue, we have to make that up. And so I'm proposing to use park impact fee money as well as rec reserve money to make up the difference to fund this project going forward. Again,
Now,
this should be a project that we complete this summer, this year.
so I think I'm tracking all this now. It might be beneficial, and I don't know if you can do it or not, but the grids with the total ins and outs where we started, if you put this part that you're showing us right here, the color underneath in between each one of those grids by fund, that might make better sense to the rest of us, especially since a lot of us are new. You see what I'm saying? So
And you're talking about here.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
right
So like
here.
underneath Fund One
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
And you put in that first bullet point that you had up above
Okay.
on that page or two ahead. I think that now makes 100% sense to me and can follow all that now
Okay.
that I understand what's what.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I can attempt to do that. I know I have done that at one point in time. And then one time someone said, hey, don't need it too much rolled up. So that's where we kind of see what works for everybody. But I
Yeah.
can certainly try that.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
this all makes sense now that you've explained all this.
Oh, good. Okay. So ideally, you should be able to go through here and track the impact of each fund and then tie it to the table. And then I only threw in the two presentations to really highlight those because those are project focused. And I've heard a lot of questions about like in the meeting so far, like, hey, I'm not sure I'm following what's really going on with this project. So I thought it made more sense to bring in project uses and sources, the full look, timing, to kind of help you really get your mind around these projects. And so I'm using that as a template. And I think if you're liking it, I'll continue to do that. And I'll talk with Public Works about anytime they bring something forward, we should probably take this type of approach. So you get to see
Yeah,
the whole picture.
I like the way this has been presented, particularly those two breakdowns, Pottery and Melcher. I like that.
Okay, good.
No, I have a basic question about 111. Do we separate the transportation impact fees from the park impact fees, or do we put them all in the same fund?
They all go into the same fund, but they are all tracked and accounted for just different GLs. So they are separate revenues, separate fund balances, separate interest. We
Well,
track
the
it all
same.
separately. It's just one fund that we call the impact fee fund. But within
Okay.
the fund, we have park impact fees, transportation impact fees, and there's one I'm missing here. Oh shoot, it'll come to me.
Utilities. Yeah.
Or
Okay.
something
Okay.
else.
Transportation park.
Sewer.
No,
don't
those
know.
are capital facility charges when it's a utility.
Stormwater.
No, storm goes. So all the utilities go to the utilities.
Oh.
I'll have to pull
Oh,
it.
schools.
Schools. And yeah, so we record the school revenue, but it's really a pass through per our agreement. So it's an in and out for us every month. So, but we do record it into our fund. So on the budget amendment, I just want to highlight the projects again: Givens Park, Pottery, some ENR, which we're going to talk about here in a second. And you'll see that. So these are like really all the accounting transactions that make those work. That's why I kind of want to start with the story first, because sometimes you get lost between the ins and outs of the accounting of it all. The other projects that I want to highlight here is the smart meter project. I'm having a request of additional radio attachments. Again, I think it's going really well. We have about 4,000 meter utilities out there. I believe there are about 1,700 radio attachments on now so far. Public Works made significant progress. Almost 30% to 40% of our total meters have the new attached equipment, which allows us to drive by currently and pick up the radio signal rather than having the crews get out and walk from house to house, touch and touch. But the next stage, the real end game and big win for the city is getting to an AMI system in which we can collect the data on the daily. Actually, it's every 4 hours we can collect the data on a meter. And the crews do not have to drive around. They do not have to go touch the meter boxes. We have live data monitoring water usage, water leaks, and we can actually bill from that platform. So that's really the end goal, is getting to an AMI system, similar to your power with PSE. They have a meter on your house. They can track you daily, and they know your usage. Right. That's all we're looking for. Right now, I have a placeholder budget of $500,000. We've got some bids of what it would cost to install the antennas at 3 different locations. We're still in the process of evaluating the best alternative for us. But because this is my last chance here, it's not my last chance, but June 25th, I'm targeting budget amendment. The next budget amendment I'm probably target in the fall. I'm putting in some requests to get that project moving. If we like the results of the study and the different proposals that'll come back. So again, this would just be adding budget authority in. Council would ultimately have to approve any contracts to install those equipment. So this isn't your only approval for this project. contracts will have to come back to council to get approval as well.
No,
But I
is
did
it-
want, but I
is
did
this
want to highlight because
500
they are big dollars.
does this 500,000 include those 3 antennas you were just mentioned?
It does, yeah. It would include the 3 antennas, plus upgrading the software and doing a little bit of training and a year of kind of annual software maintenance. So
Okay.
my current estimate is to get it, that would get us fully live AMI for the city.
In a few
What's
years,
m-
paid for
yeah.
itself in labor savings.
Yeah, again, it's an estimate right now. I think it's a really high estimate. I think we are working with our vendor to get that number down to something a little more palatable to us in the water fund. But it's important to me now because now I'm starting to look at the 25-26 budget, and having an up-to-date budget through June is going to be important for forecasting and planning and building as we go out. So that's why I'm requesting it now to get it in, to get it factored into the water fund itself.
Correct. No, you've been involved in these meetings. I think we're trying to get it down to 2 locations versus the 3, aren't we? And is whether we
Well,
can get proper coverage or not that we need.
yeah, so I mean that's what we're evaluating right now. We originally got a proposal for the 3, and we're evaluating can we get the same proper coverage with 2. Of course, the consultants on these type of projects, because they want to stand behind their work of 100% coverage, they build in redundancy, which would be the multiple towers and antennas. And so we're just asking the question, is it too much redundancy at this moment in time? Is it overbuilding the AMI system? Can we go with something a little more cost effective now and then build it maybe at another location in the following biennium? So we're kind of playing with our options, trying to see what's the best option to fully meet the goal.
So, I have a question. So when that contract comes, say, right? So I'm going to try and follow this as it goes. You're gonna ask for this $500,000 increase in this budget amendment, which I'm coming maybe later this month.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Right. And then this contract comes up, just so I understand how the process of everything works. Right. So, and we get the staff report that says no impact to budget because we've already budgeted it. Is it standard procedure that we move this budget before that contract comes our way? Or would you have noted that in the staff report, when it comes to fiscal impacts to us, that we've already updated this budget once and increased this? Or
Yeah. No, these are really good, I would say, council member type conversations and discussions. From my perspective, I think it's always important to have budget before you go and get a contract. A lot of times that we're awarding a contract and I'm chasing it with a budget. I, from the finance department's perspective, I think if you're doing a plan, in our next annual budget, you heard me say this, we're doing a plan, we're kind of identify everything we're going to do. We should put that in the budget now, because that's what we intend to do. And then when the contract comes to council can evaluate whether they want to go forward with the project or not. I think it's a little bit backwards, and just due to time, how these things work, right? But to bring a contract forward without budget authority, right? Because then I haven't had a chance to fully kind of bake it all into the entire biennial budget, say, yes, this is what it would look like before and after. So from the finance perspective, I think it makes sense to do the budget now. And then when the contract comes, council can opine on the value of the contract, whether they want this project to go forward or not. And if you guys say no, there's no harm. It's just in the budget. It's not going to do anything, right? But if you guys decide you want to approve the contract and you guys feel good that it's already been accounted for in the finances, you can see we're already planning ahead in doing that type of work. Mayor?
Part of this process too is, from finances side, is Public Works has said, hey, we want to do this and we're working towards this. By budgeting it, now we've taken it out of fund balance, okay? And it prevents anybody from saying, oh, we've got plenty of money in that fund balance where we can do this other thing, and no, by doing this, then it's out of the fund balance, and it's truer to what we do have in fund balance, because It's basically, it's been set aside for this project. It may not be the exact right number because we haven't completed the design or gone out to bid, but then that's where we come back to you guys and true want to award the contract and then do these budget amendments to true up the actual expenses.
So maybe my follow-up question is, or maybe this is a follow-up request, Noah, is when said contract maybe comes our way, right? And we get our staff report that predates any contract that we're going to approve and resolution to approve it. In the finances, while we've already budgeted for this piece, we did it with a budget amendment when we increased for this project XYZ. Maybe that's what I'm looking for, so that there's color behind that as well, that we understand, oh yeah, we already did this. Remember when we did this back in June, when we see this contract in October.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment that we could add more color to the fiscal note impact.
Yeah.
And I can talk with Public Works and DCD about that as well.
All right, thank you.
And again, I want to circle back on the mayor's point, which is a very good, valid point. And then thus the reason why I'm bringing forward this now is, again, you can see here for this water operating fund, these budget requests, which I am also increasing revenue. Again, this is based on 2023. We did realize additional revenue. So I'm using some of this revenue to offset the impact of these expenses on fund balance. But you can see it is a reduction in fund balance. So almost by $1 million. Again, the income statement shows the impacts of that then. But as the mayor said, that also then says, hey, this is how much we actually have in the budget for additional things. So it really keeps it on the forefront. So that's the water meter project and AMI work, pottery. For sewer capital, I want to point this one out, South Sydney Sewer Ruby Lift Station. Again, this is the project. We have an ILA with Transit to provide the full funding for this design phase. We did not, again, at the biennial budget, at the beginning of the biennial budget and the mid-year, we did not have an ILA in place with Transit. So I did not want to put that in yet because I didn't know if those agreements would fall apart. But we have since awarded that agreement with Transit, and so I'm bringing in the revenue to match the agreement, $750,000 for that project. I'm also bringing in the additional expense authority to match the $750,000. Again, we originally put in the Sydney Sewer Lift Station project, I think it was estimated at $700,000 would be the amount for expense and the ILA. But now that we've completed the ILA and have a design cost, it's going to be $750,000. So this transaction is simply reflecting what we've already done.
And Noah, that revenue is really dollars coming from Kitsap Transit reimbursing us. It's not money coming out of our utility fund.
Yeah.
It's money coming from Kitsap Transit.
Correct. That's a deposit from Kitsap Transit. So then the last fund I wanted to highlight, because it wasn't up above, is the ER&R fund. There are some modifications to the fleet that our fleet department has requested. The overall impact to the ER fund is a reduction of $73,000. And that's primarily driven by increasing our expense for this police vehicle of $73,000. We had a police vehicle 1040, which was due to be replaced next biennial period. But it has, I guess I'll say it malfunctioned. And we have decided not to repair it because it's so due to replacement. It doesn't make sense to put that much money into the vehicle. So we're going to surplus it. But the police department has asked that we move that replacement up a year then, so they can order the vehicle now. And again, this you'll learn this through the budgeting process. When we order vehicles is not necessarily the same year we get the vehicles. So if we increase the expense authority now for the police department, they order the vehicle now, they're not likely to get it till next year sometime. So next year is when the expense would actually occur, which is actually more in line with its replacement schedule, oddly enough. So anyways, I'm bringing that forward a year in replacement because they are down a vehicle and have a request that we move that replacement up. And we did not feel appropriate to put the money into the vehicle to get it back on the road.
Is that the vehicle we're already, I think we're surplusing tonight?
I would have to look and see if it's what number it's tagged at.
Okay.
Okay, it could be. A couple of the other modifications. Again, we got a whole new public works team over there with a new director, a new operations manager, and soon to be another public works operation manager. We've met with this team over the last year and continually say, hey, here's your fleet. This is what it looks like. Is this what you think it should look like in the future? Because the last management team had a different vision of what that fleet should look like. This management team has identified that they believe the mechanics could use a van that would allow them to go out into the field to repair vehicles if needed. They currently don't have a van. We currently give them vehicles that have been surplus and pretty much are at the end of their useful life. And we've done that primarily as a cost saving measure over time as we've kind of grown this ENR fleet and grown our mechanics department. But we feel now maybe is the right time to get them their own vehicle so they can have mechanical tools in there to leave the shop and go out into the field if and when heavy equipment and vehicles break down. So that would be a modification of not replacing an F-150 truck, instead purchasing a van, and there's not a one-for-one cost replacement. So the truck costs a lot less than the van. So we would request additional authority of $46,000 to purchase the van, but we'd use the cost savings of the truck for the other half of that van. The other modification to the fleet would be we've recently adopted and approved 2 new purchases of F-150 trucks for our water department. We added 2 water employees in the mid-biennial review, and we added 2 water trucks for those employees. Again, talking with the management team, they think it makes more sense to remove those 2 trucks and instead buy 1 F-350 flatbed truck for the water department. And they are kind of leading the public works shop in a different direction that maybe not every public works shop employee needs a truck, that maybe they can carpool more for job site specific. So the fleet might change a little bit in that respect. So this is one that we said, hey, it makes more sense. We don't need 2 trucks. We need 1. We need a bigger truck that we can haul the equipment on, and they can all hop in this other truck together and carpool there to the job location. Similarly, that's what, well, and this is the other side of that mechanics. Yeah, so those are the 2 modifications and then the 1 addition. And then the last one is Exhibit A, adding the civil 1 engineer. And Mayor, I don't know if you'd want to speak to that at all. Again, I commented earlier that the $69,000 did include this FTE.
Yeah, and we've got a candidate. Matter of fact, I've been in, he's gonna be in, he's got some experience. He's in the military reserves, and that's and where he's gotten a lot of his experience. He's got him come in as a 1, which is an engineer in training. As soon as he passes the exam, which probably you got to get enough experience and then take the test. And once you pass the test, then you're eligible to become an engineer 2. And hasn't always been our practice to automatically promote people, but in this employment world, if we don't promote him, somebody else will. So I think it's important that we're conscious of that, and to reward this person, because once they have their stamp, they're worth a lot more to us and everybody else. But it appears to be the right, personality fit. Got some good experience. He just doesn't have his license yet.
Was this an in-house person, Mr. Mayor?
It is not, but we did interview for the assistant city engineer position, and we likely are going to promote our 2 as a possibility. He interviewed well. So Public Works, so that would leave us with another 1 or 2, depending on what we can find out there. We'd like a 2 that has a license to replace. Our 2 is becoming the 3, which is the assistant city engineer now, potentially. If that happened, then we'd be not in advertising for the assistant, which is the engineer 3 position, any longer, and to attempt to backfill with another 1 or 2, depending on what we can find out there. Did we talk about sales tax already? I missed the first few minutes of the meeting.
We did. Yep.
Yeah, we did.
Okay. Did you talk about all the experience our neighbors are having and countywide a little bit to just want to color the, we're performing really, really well, which you saw in those numbers. That isn't the case. I'm on a number of countywide boards, and they're performing flat. And Noah, talking to some of his peers, even some cities are actually in the red a little bit. And this is truly a product of our, because it's, I think it's a product of our housing market and construction materials. And so we need to be really cautious as we're going to start developing a budget here in the next couple months. And, construction could slow down here in the next biennium. And so I think we need to be conservative and conscious that we're an anomaly right now and amongst our peers. It's good right now, other than building all the infrastructure we need.
So I just want to conclude on this budget amendment as is. So hopefully this makes a lot more sense. And I guess normally I would ask if the Finance Committee has additional questions, concerns, or is supportive of the budget amendment as presented, so that I know going on the 25th that you guys are supportive and you feel like you've had enough time to absorb and have questions.
Well, I'm appreciative of how you presented it, and it all looks good to me.
It looks
Council-
fine. It just makes me wonder about the 200,000 projected revenue for next year based on this year, if that's what's happening. But that's a future worry.
I don't understand the question.
Oh, it's just a comment that Noah said that the 200,000 revenue for 20 comes from our 2023 revenue, and we have that. It looked like there was another spot where we're going to be filling in 200,000 for this year.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get it, but we don't. I'm just not sure.
it's cash. It's cash that we have because we overperformed last year.
For 23, right?
Yes. So it's not like we're projecting we're going to get this cash. We actually have the cash. It would be concerning if we were increasing our projected revenue and counting on future revenue we don't have yet for a budget amendment. But this is cash carry forward for all intents and purposes, because we overperformed, and it's cash we have in hand.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, well,
I heard from Mark. Would you have your guys' support to bring this forward on the 25th? The support of the committee?
For the budget amendment, yeah.
Okay.
There is one other piece. Again, I didn't get to it because it came kind of late last Friday. I'm going to show you real quickly. I think you guys are talking about this tonight, or at least have some type of presentation on Bethel Phase 1, the Salmonberry Blueberry design work. So just get this in your thoughts as far as timing's concerned. Depending on how well it goes tonight, council will give direction to move forward with the project. And I believe at this point, the project would need an additional budget amendment to kind of move it to the next phase of design. So I put this together, rough numbers, with Public Works on Friday. And to Councilmember Morrissey's question, here we go. Here's a perfect example where what we know as of today, what we're thinking about as far as what the costs are for design, 1.4 million to complete this design work with some salary budget. Again, I don't have any budgets for the other pieces because we just don't have enough information to actually put in a good figure. But if the council is supportive of kind of the conversation tonight and says, yes, let's move this design forward and project forward, it will need a budget amendment. So like I was kind of tracking what was happening Friday. I said, hey, shoot, maybe I should put some numbers in front of the Finance Committee. And then depending on what happens tonight, I could include this into the budget amendment. It's currently not in it, but I would, if the full council tonight is supportive of the project moving forward and we need budget authority to move it forward, I would then include this type of amendment for the 25th. So overall, I believe sign costs are estimated at $1.4 million to complete it. Our funding sources, again, let's walk through these because this would be helpful. Part of our funding sources are fund balance in our Fund 304, which is developer funded. So a developer has previously given us money for this intersection, which we can use, and that's $234,000. It's been sitting in the fund as we've been waiting to kind of get further along in this project. We also had the HE developer, as a part of an agreement that this council approved, also give us $96,000 to do some design work as a part of this Bethel phase project. So these first two sources are really developer funds that we have received. Fund 109 is a REIT fund. $87,000 we spent in the last biennium to kind of get this design work moving forward. And we currently have $103,000 and $306,000 of transportation impact fee money budgeted for this project. The other source of funding I would turn to round out this 1.4 million is the Fund 002, in which the council took action to implement a public transportation tax. I believe it was 2 years ago now. And so we've been collecting those funds, and they were specifically called out for this project. So now we actually have the cash in the account, and I would propose that we use roughly $600,000 to complete this phase of the project, and I'm calling it the design phase.
Noah, does this get us to the 90% design with these dollars, or is it what level of design does this get us to?
I believe this gets us complete with design, Rob.
100%? Okay.
Yeah, I believe it was a quick conversation with Chris on Friday. I said I need a high number that gets us through the design entirely, if that's what council says to do. So I can plug this in for a budget amendment. And so this is what he thinks is the high side. So what we spent to date, so far to date, we've spent roughly 519. Well, actually, I'll call it 520, but we spent 519,000 on design itself. Again, you guys are going to see the design results tonight, I believe, and have a discussion about that. And if our current estimate to complete the design is correct, that means we need an additional 880,000 for design completion. Again, these tables are going to be very similar. I'm just kind of identifying budget amendment by funding source. The key is the 508,000. We currently have $722,000 budgeted in this biennium. We would need an additional $580,000 to get us to a total $1.4 million project budget. Again, when I define the project budget, I'm saying just the design phase. Okay, good. And then similarly, I don't need a budget amendment for any of the funds up above because I already have budget authority for that. And this one actually, I'm thinking of reducing okay, I'll try to make this shorter. Because we have these funds, $234,000 in that fund, we've been accruing interest on that. That would be attributed to this project. So instead of reducing this, I think I can use that interest earnings and bump up my project budget. But at this moment, if I want this row to balance in its entirety, I would have to reduce that amount. So it's an accounting thing. I'll clean it up by the time we get to the amendment. But the real key here is that we would propose Fund 002, that public transportation tax dollars, 500, we'll call it $600,000, be budgeted this biennium to use for this project. Again, the project being the right of way, or not right of way, the design phase.
Design.
Yep.
And that particular fund is the 1/10 or 1% sales tax dollars that the council put in place to fund this project.
Correct. So I think I'm going to wait and see how it goes tonight. And then if I watch the video back and hear that, yes, the mayor reports back, yes, we're supportive, go forward, get better numbers or the best numbers we can get to complete the phase and build it into the budget amendment, I will do that and build it in for the 25th.
Well, and I believe Dennis has to bring back a contract amendment for the 100% design also. So there's two pieces to it. One is a contract with the design firm, and two, then the funding source to fund that contract. But you guys are getting a presentation tonight on where we're at on this. I think I can't remember if it's a 30 or a 60% design.
I believe it's 60 right now. Yeah.
60, okay.
Yeah. And so again, due to the timing of when they bring the contract, I would propose to include this into the budget amendment. So we'd have the budget authority. And then when they bring the contract to council, council can approve it or not at that time, but at least we'll have the funds available to complete the work. Okay, so if there's no further questions on the budget or budget amendment, gonna move forward. Oh man, we're late. I'm sorry. Want to move to the next portion of discussion, which is on the investment policy. Here we go, investment policy. So we've been talking about creating an investment policy, I guess, since I've started here. I just haven't had the time to do it. So I focused down and did it, but we've had conversations over the years about what it should look like. And we've been doing outreach with our other jurisdictions, entities to formulate a good policy. But to really tee this up well for, I think for the finance committee, I want to do a quick overview of our current financial institutions, which are Key Bank, the Kitsap County. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Kitsap Bank. Thank you, Mayor. Kitsap Bank, the Kitsap County Investment Pool, and then the Local Government Investment Pool, LGIP. And then we'll talk, after we kind of go through this overview, we'll talk about the investment policy. I've provided already, so if you had a chance to read it, that's great. And if you have questions, happy to answer. All right, first, the significance of Kitsap Bank. What do they do for us? They serve as an entity that we deposit our money into and write checks out of, really. We don't do investing with that bank. It's mainly a cash position, which we maintain a lower level of balance, and we stay invested in both the county investment pool and the state local government investment pool, the LGIP. It's good to know that the Kitsap Bank is FDIC insured, is also a member of the Washington Public Deposit Protection Commission, which provides additional insurance on our deposits. The funds that we have in the Kitsap Bank, they actually don't earn interest. Instead, the compensating balances, as we call them, serve to offset costs of bank services. So we don't pay any banking services for Kitsap Bank because we don't earn interest, and so they offset each other. And there's a calculation that the Kitsap Bank provides us that as long as we maintain a balance of $2.4 million, we are not charged any bank service fees.
So John,
Okay.
you would know those as cash management services from your banking days.
Okay. So that's Kitsap's bank role with us. The Kitsap County Investment Pool, again, this is the county treasurers actively manages their investment pool of nearly $1 billion, all special purpose districts in the county, as well as cities that want to participate in the pool can. They have county oversight by the County Finance Committee, according to the RCWs. And we are a participant in the pool, and we have roughly 24% of our total funds, or roughly about $24 million invested with the county. The local government investment pool is actually managed by the state treasurer's office. It's a big pool, about $26 billion of funds that are pooled and invested and managed by the state, with the primary objectives under the state LGIP of being safety of the principal dollars, maintaining liquidity to meet cash flow needs, and then providing a competitive interest rate or return on your investment. The key is that both the Kitsap County Investment Pool and the LGIP are 100% liquid, meaning we could get cash out day of. But because they are very liquid, it limits some of the longer term maturities of investments that you could invest in. Again, the city currently participates in the LGIP and currently has about $71 million invested in the pool, which is roughly about 73% of our total funds. And here's a nice little pie chart that kind of illustrates the total amount of our cash that's invested by pool type. And you can see here, year to date, excuse me, for 2024, in the county pool, we've have an annualized yield of roughly 3.25% and have earned about $320,000 of interest. Again, that's on $24 million. But the LGIP has had a very good year comparatively with an annualized yield of 5.4%. And again, that's why we're more heavily weighted in the LGIP, because the interest return is nearly double to the county pool. So far through 2024, we've earned roughly $1.6 million in interest. Again, the interest is identified and accrued to each of our funds. So general fund has its own portion, street fund has its own portion, the capital funds have their own portion based on fund balance. So the interest is distributed back to those funds based on its monthly fund balance. But I think it's a nice illustration to show, kind of where the funds are invested, and as well as the interest rate return that we're receiving right now currently. So I don't want to go into these too much. I'll just touch on the graph real briefly. This is a graph of the U.S. Treasury yield curve. And this kind of will flow into the question of why are we proposing this now? Why do we think this makes sense? If you see where we're at in the U.S. Treasury curve, the curve is actually inverted. And it has been for some time, which means that let me see here. Which means that the short-term rates are expected to be higher than the long-term rates, which signals ultimately that there could be some cuts coming up as far as the Treasury yields. And the reason I'm illustrating that is because with the LGIP and the Kitsap County being very liquid means that they're very short. So they're heavily invested in the short end of the curve and not very much invested in the longer end of the curve. In today's rate environment, where the Fed funds rate is, let me go back to the Fed funds chart here. This will illustrate, with a higher Fed funds rate between 5% and 5%, we do very well because we're invested short term with the federal funds rate. We're earning that 5% and 5%. However, in 20 to 22, when the federal funds rate was near zero, that is approximately what we were earning in interest. So because it's very liquid, very short term, we really do follow the federal funds rate and interest returns, generally speaking. And I'm highlighting this because it's been talked about for at least last 6 months to a year that they expect the Federal Reserve to cut rates. Recession's on the horizon. They're going to cut rates. They haven't done that through June, even though it was predicted about 9 months ago that they would start in the spring. This all feeds into, again, what I'm going to say is, why do I think this is the right time? We've been talking about investment policy for some time. I do think we are at the peak of this federal funds target, and maybe we'll remain flat for a while. But it is expected, anticipated that they will start cutting rates in the near future. And when they do that, our interest rates will go down. So why now? Again, we have large cash balances. This is the first time, I guess, we've grown as a city to actually have large cash balances. We did not have these large balances when I first got here. Some of it's due to we have a lot of capital projects. We've instituted impact fees. We've instituted capital facility charges for water, sewer, and now storm. So we've been accumulating a lot of cash for these capital projects. We have large balances. Interest rates, again, could come down in the next couple of years. We think it makes sense to have our own investment policy, which would allow us to go a little further out on the yield curve to lock in and fix on some of the good interest rate yields right now. And a lot of jurisdictions are doing that, and I think it makes sense. So the policy I sent out, a couple of highlights I want to focus on. We have a policy statement in there that's the policy of the city to invest the public funds in a manner which will provide the maximum security and market rate of return while meeting the daily cash flow requirements and conforming to all state statutes governing the investments of the funds under the control of the city. I want to note that this policy, we didn't just write this up ourselves. We've been working with other jurisdictions and other accredited agencies such as GFA, which is the Governmental Finance Officers Association, the Washington Public Treasurers Association, Municipal Research and Services Center, to develop this policy. There's lots of good policy templates out there that have been vetted, that have been accredited. And so we have pretty much done, I think, an efficient job in copy pasting the best policies out there, best practices, and kind of making sure it meets what the city of Port Orchard needs. But these have been very well vetted with these various large entities and agencies. Of course, the policy is going to operate with all federal, state, and other legal requirements under the RCWs. And it's the city's intent, then after council adopts our policy, we're going to submit our policy to the Washington Public Treasurers Association and seek a certification of our policy. I think the main point of that slide is just to communicate that we're using industry best practices as it comes to developing this municipal policy. And municipal governments, they are very limited in what they can invest in on their own. It's really state statute, federally driven. So again, the goal of being very safe is always our goal with investments. So the next couple slides, I want to talk about key components. I'm not going to go over the entire investment policy. It's a 15-page document, but I did want to hit on these two in particular as it relates to the Finance Committee. So first of all, the scope of our investment objectives. Here are our priorities in order. Safety. Safety of the principal is the primary objective of this policy and how we would go about purchasing investments. Liquidity, because we have so many capital projects and cash flow needs, we will be calculating what we need to have on hand in cash. And so as a part of that policy, safety, liquidity, and the last piece of our investment policy is the reinvestment return. We think we will be able to lock in some longer maturities, which will help to level off any, I guess it'll allow us to hedge against any decline in interest rates by locking in some of these fixed rates now. But again, we're going to focus primarily on safety, liquidity, and then return on investment. And these are primarily, I think, every city's objectives, as well as the state treasurer's office objectives in order. Again, you can't do much as a government entity when it comes to the world of investments. But the delegation of authority is important. I think ultimately it's a responsibility, authority of the city council, who authorized to direct the management of the funds in the program. I mean, the council is always in charge of the purse strings, but adopting the policy does give us the ability then to go out and start the program and work with financial advisors and brokers to meet our policy goals. But we do have a role for the Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee will directly oversee the investment program. The committee will be responsible for updating the investment policy and reviewing the investment portfolio. Authority, again, under this policy, would be delegated to the finance director, who will establish written procedures for the operations of an investment program consistent with the policy. And ultimately, I'm responsible for all the transactions undertaken to make sure we have internal controls and are meeting our fiduciary responsibility. We do have a role for an investment advisor in this policy. Through our research, what we find is our city is not the size that I'd want to hire a full-time employee to be our investment person. Instead, what a lot of cities our size do, and larger actually, because Bremerton does this, you contract out, you put out an RFP and RFQ for an investment advising firm who would come in and serve as a consultant and really execute with the broker side of your portfolio strategy. So we wouldn't have to manage the day-to-day. We'd have an investment advisor who is a financial obligation to the city. And that is a way that smaller entities can then start to develop their own investment portfolio. So I want to pause there, make sure that the delegation makes sense and you guys are comfortable being directly overseeing the program. I would see this as being similar to our kind of monthly reports that we would have the investment advisor kind of report to us what the portfolio looks like, the returns on the portfolio, to really understand that, and probably do that on a monthly basis, minimum quarterly, but maybe monthly to start with.
I'm going to take that as you're seeking input there. As I went through the 15-page document, I didn't see where we outline any cadence. So I'm hearing that you're looking for that input here, and or what that oversight looks like. I don't know that I truly spelled that out here in the policy.
As far as with the role of the oversight of the Finance Committee?
Correct.
I probably can't pull it. Well, I could try to pull that up. I think the oversight is going to be similar to the oversight that Finance Committee provides now. Generally, on anything we do, we come discuss with the Finance Committee first.
So maybe my question is more,
Yeah.
get more direct. No, are you going to be making these transactions, or are you going to bring these in front of council like we do, say, a budget, and we're still going to have to approve every trade or every investment?
No, I think I would be the authority would be delegated down to me to execute the transactions. And then I'd be reporting back to the finance committee on what the portfolio is and how we're doing it.
Okay. So that's kind of how I understood it, but then I didn't see,
Okay.
like, while it says that, you know, the finance committee is going to have that oversight, it doesn't define what that is.
Noah's going to probably provide you a report that says here's what we're invested in, here's what the returns are, you know,
And here's considerations for future.
here's what we're, you know, here's what I'm contemplating doing.
Yeah.
You know, in the future.
Yeah, all good comments. And John, you're right. I mean, as I read all these policies again, our language is very consistent with all other policies. And I think they kind of kept it that kind of relationship that, you know, you're an oversight board. So you aren't down in the transaction in the weeds of it all.
Which I'm okay with. I want to know kind of like what that cadence is, what that expectation is. Yeah.
Okay. Good comments. And so the last slide I have here is, again, as a municipality, we're pretty limited in the total world of investments that we purchase. If you see in the document, it's generally very safe stuff, obligations of the U.S. government, U.S. government agency notes, corporations that are wholly owned by the U.S. government, eligible municipal bonds. So we're not out there buying stocks, we're out there mainly buying U.S. treasuries and kind of adjusting on the yield curve that way. But it's all driven by state statutes as far as what we can invest in. And then we do have a short table on the constraints of the maturity and kind of, again, what we envision. A weighted average maturity of no more than 2 years, which means it's fairly short still, but longer than, you know, what I'd say the LGIP 30 days. Their duration's very, very short. Again, the overall, I think the way we would approach this, again, we would hire an investment advisory firm to work with us on this, to look at our total cash positions, to look at our total projects, look at the forecasting of when those cash would be needed. So we have a firm grip on the liquidity side. We don't want to go out too far. And then we kind of ease our way into this kind of execution of a investment policy. I'm not looking to run out and do a whole lot quick. It's going to be a learning process for us as we develop this program. But we are putting up constraints and limitations as far as what we can do.
And so, no, I assume you have a listing, or you can find a listing of firms that specialize in working with municipalities or other governmental agencies in this investment strategy.
Yeah, we know the firms. We participate in a lot of different associations, Washington Finance Officers Association, the Governmental Finance Officers Association, which is the parent organization of WFOA, GFOA, we have WPTA, we have AWC. So all these banking firms and relationships, they come to advertise their services and kind of make those relationships known. Again, our intent would be put out an RFQ, RFP, since we know a lot of them, and then really take a broad look at this thing. There's nobody in particular that we're necessarily focused on, but there is about 5 or 6 firms right here in Washington that'd be local, that we could talk to as in regards to executing this program. And then they got to be competitive on the cost side as well.
Are we constrained to the lowest bidder on this type of a situation as well?
I do not believe we are, because of professional services. So
That's good
but
to hear.
yeah, it would be a factor in our negotiations, though.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to have a competitive process to obtain the advisors.
What's your implementation timeframe?
Well, that's a good question. So my intent is to bring this policy to the 25th for adoption, assuming the Finance Committee is supportive of us going forward with an investment program and this policy we'd adopt on the 25th. sometime in July and August, we'd put together the RFQ and RFP and advertise, say by late fall. I'm just trying to have a practical timeline to this thing. And so ideally, we would have an investment advisory firm sometime in the fall. I don't want to let it get too far away. Again, part of the reasons why we want to do this, we believe, is because the interest rate environment is a good environment to lock in. And the Fed meets more frequently than I have time for. So they could start a rate cutting cycle at any point, which would change kind of those maturities that we could buy now. If that makes sense.
I would be in favor of moving this forward. My one recommendation is section 5.1, paragraph 2. And I wouldn't get super in depth so that you box yourself in that says you have to do it monthly. I would say at least it would make my heart feel better if it were semi-annually.
What section? You said 5?
5.1, paragraph 2, Finance Committee. The Finance Committee will directly oversee the investment program. The
Okay.
committee will be responsible for updating the investment policy and reviewing the investment portfolio at a minimum of semi-annually or something. It shows that
Okay.
we do at least twice a year, but I'd like to see it more often. But for future, I may not always be on this committee or on this council. I would hope that they're looking at it with you at least twice a year.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. That's fair to have that in there. And I think, just practically, I'm thinking as we get into this thing, it's going to be more frequent at first. And then once we get comfortable, maybe we'll push it to quarterly or something, unless there's something to report. Unless it's an easy report. I guess I'm not totally sure of how the reporting side would look, but if it's clean and easy, maybe we do it monthly, but maybe not.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it moving forward.
I mean, it could be just a report that's in with our, cash receipts, just like, every month, it's just part of the packet.
Yeah.
I mean, once you buy a 3-year instrument, it's just showing us the report that you
Right.
haven't cashed it in at a penalty and.
Right. Great. Well, then I will bring both these forward on the 25th. It sounds like I do have the support of the Finance Committee for the investment policy budget amendment. And then again, depending on how tonight's conversation goes regarding with the Bethel project, I will add that into this amendment to provide them some authority to complete the design work. And we'll fine tune what that number is.
All right. So anything for the good of the order? Fred, anything on your end? Are you there, Fred?
Yes and no.
Okay. Well, with that, do we have a scheduled meeting for July? Meeting date for July?
Same
I guess
July work study.
yeah,
What's
it
that?
would be our normal July work study, which I think is July
16th.
23rd.
That's the 4th.
Council meeting's the 9th, work study, excuse me, the 16th, you're right. Yeah, we have got 5 Tuesdays, so we'll have an extra Tuesday off.
July 16th. All right.
Okay.
There's nothing else for the good of the order. We've got next month's meeting scheduled. This meeting, I would say, is adjourned. We'll see some of you here in an hour and a half or so.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.